We begin in the Middle East, where Gaza is still under siege, with Israel blocking supplies of water, electricity, food, and fuel across its border. Israel's military says 20 children under 18 are among 200 hostages being held in Gaza after the Hamas attacks. In a recent development, Hamas is offering to release some of them in exchange for an immediate ceasefire. We have details in this report.
In exchange for an immediate ceasefire, Hamas is now offering to release some hostages. Israel has so far not agreed to this. An estimated 203 hostages are being held in Gaza. While Hamas does not hold all the hostages, some are being held by other armed militant groups. But continued captivity in Gaza is a complicating factor for Israeli commanders planning their intended incursion into the territory. In the meantime, an Israeli air attack has killed and injured a large number of displaced persons sheltering at a church compound in Gaza. According to witnesses, the air raid appeared to have been aimed at a target close to the 12th century place of worship, where many Christian and Muslim Gaza residents had taken refuge as the war raged in the enclave. In a swift reaction, the Israeli military said its fighter jets had hit a command and control center involved in launching rockets and mortars towards Israel. The Greek Orthodox Patriarchate in Jerusalem described the explosion as a war crime. And as the war intensifies, Secretary General of the United Nations Antonio Guterres is in Egypt, where he is calling for trucks carrying aid to be allowed into Gaza.
Side by side with Israel.
He says he has seen so many trucks loaded with water, fuel, medicines, food, adding that these trucks would be a lifeline and the difference between life and death for so many people in Gaza. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is attending talks in Egypt as fears grow that the conflict could spread. Mr. Sunak had earlier met the Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, to agree on the urgent need to get food, water and medicine into Gaza. They agreed on the need to prevent Middle East escalation. Palestinian officials say more than 3,700 people have been killed in Gaza since Hamas attacked Israel on the 7th of October and killed more than 1,400 people. The first shelter camp for displaced Palestinians was set up by the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees in the battered enclave on Thursday, established at the UNRWA Industrial Training Station in the heart of Gaza. The shelter camp has become a temporary home for the numerous families who have been forced to seek refuge as a result of the Israeli military campaign. In the wake of the war in the Middle East, the security situation is also tense in Germany. In several cities, there is therefore a ban on pro-Palestinian demonstrations. Nevertheless, many people took to the streets again. The atmosphere was particularly heated in Berlin, Neukölln. Stones, bottles, and firecrackers flew at the police. Officers have, however, arrested some of the rioters. In Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic, partisans of the Israeli and Palestinian causes faced off in opposing protests and came to blows over the current conflict. The pro-Palestinian protesters argued they had filed the proper requests and obtained the necessary permits for their peaceful protest, while the pro-Israel protesters justified their presence by arguing that Israel had a biblical right to the disputed territory.
In a rare White House speech, U.S. President Joe Biden has said the world history is at an inflection point as he made the case for a smart investment of billions of dollars in wartime aid for Ukraine and Israel. He said Hamas and Russia both want to annihilate a neighboring democracy. Mr. Biden's primetime address to the nation from the Oval Office on Thursday evening was the second of his presidency. There is more in this report.
President Joe Biden addressed the nation Thursday night amid the tense international conflict in Israel and Ukraine. Speaking from the Oval Office, the president described both wars as an inflection point in global security. While making his appeal, Mr. Biden went on to say America has an obligation to help its allies and partners.
Beyond Europe, We know that our allies, and maybe most importantly our adversaries and competitors, are watching. They're watching our response in Ukraine as well. And if we walk away and let Putin erase Ukraine's independence, would-be aggressors around the world would be emboldened to try the same. The risk of conflict and chaos could spread in other parts of the world, in the Indo-Pacific, in the Middle East, especially in the Middle East. Iran is supporting Russia in Ukraine, and it's supporting Hamas and other terrorist groups in the region, and will continue to hold them accountable, I might add.
The president's address comes as his administration plans to request approval from Congress for a $100 billion aid package. The White House says if approved, the money will go towards several security purposes. Along with helping Ukraine and Israel, the package would fund other national security priorities, such as increasing security measures along the southern border. The Biden administration also wants to ramp up security efforts in the Indo-Pacific as the White House monitors the influence China is trying to assert over the region.
American leadership is what holds the world together. American alliances are what keep us, America, safe. American values are what make us a partner that other nations want to work with. To put all that at risk, if we walk away from Ukraine, if we turn our backs on Israel, it's just not worth it. That's why tomorrow I'm going to send to Congress an urgent budget request to fund America's national security needs, to support our critical partners, including Israel and Ukraine. It's a smart investment that's going to pay dividends for American security for generations. Help us keep American troops out of harm's way. Help us build a world that is safer, more peaceful, more prosperous for our children and grandchildren.
However, President Biden's aid package cannot make it through Congress, with the House in disarray. Both chambers would need to approve the bill, and the House remains at a standstill without a Speaker of the House in place. The president in his address also tried to make an emotional plea. He said millions of Americans are being impacted by the conflict between Israel and Hamas. He went on to point out that as the world watches the Middle East, the suffering continues in Ukraine as people there keep up their fight against Russian aggression.
You know, and here at home, we have to be honest with ourselves. In recent years, too much hate has given too much oxygen, fueling racism, the rise of anti-Semitism, Islamic phobia, right here in America. And I want to say this to you. You're all America. You're all America. This is in a moment, you know, in moments like these, when fear and suspicion, anger and rage run hard, that we have to work harder than ever to hold on to the values that make us who we are. We're a nation of religious freedom, freedom of expression.